with possible action from the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the administration please present this report?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. I would like to begin this evening by thanking all of you for helping our staff, our students, our families, and schools get off to a great start by joining us as we launch both the early start and traditional start calendars. You all have made yourselves available to engage with our schools and our educators, and we appreciate all of the visits that you have made thus far this year. I shared with the community at our kickoff, all committed to maintaining this level of energy and support throughout this entire school year. With respect to enrollment, we are thrilled that our families in Milwaukee made Milwaukee Public Schools their district of choice. That being said, I am pleased to announce that we exceeded our projected enrollment for the 2022-23 school year, 100.003%, a total of 255 students over our projection. The attached report underscores just some of the highlights in the district at this time. Fall is always a time of the year for schools to welcome families to visit their campuses and classrooms for open house. We encourage families to take advantage and to engage with their children's staff to find out how they can help support their academic success. Earlier this month, we had two remarkable groundbreaking events planned to add major improvements to our schools. We unveiled the phase schedule for Reagan High School expansion and athletic field. We also are proud of the groundbreaking that took place at Washington High School, where the work began to replace the track and athletic field. These projects would not have been possible without the philanthropy community dedicated to supporting high-quality facilities for the students in the Milwaukee Public Schools. We encourage that our partnership through MQ, Milwaukee Area Technical College, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and the Milwaukee Public Schools continues to thrive with the collaboration for our students and educators to connect learning opportunities, support transitions to MATC and UWM, and drive college completion. We believe early and often college and career exposure to opportunities will help empower our students and families. I would also like to take this opportunity to remind eighth graders throughout the city to take advantage of the numerous high school options during the school selection process, which began Saturday, October 1st at Milwaukee High School of the Arts. And we look forward to meeting all of those eager faces this Saturday at Milwaukee High School of the Arts from 9 a.m. to 12 noon to assist students and families with high school selections. We all have this wonderful opportunity available for our young people, and with all these opportunities available, continue to make MPS a school of choice, as well as a district of choice. Thank you. That concludes my report, and you can find the remainder of my report attached. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board wish to make any comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
for our listening audience, Director Garcia has joined the board.
thank you. Yes, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the donors and advocates who have been pushing for those changes at Reagan and Washington. These are really exciting times, and I know it means a lot to the community. So I said it at the Reagan groundbreaking, but I just wanted to say it here that these public-private partnerships mean so much to our community, and these changes are so welcome. So I wanted to thank them again, and also just put in a plug that I know there are high school open houses even happening tonight. I, as a parent, went to two of them last night because my son is in 8th grade and he's going to be making that selection soon. And so I would encourage all the families, if they can make that, make time in their schedule to go speak directly with the people that are in the schools. I think it sometimes it helps to have that perspective because we hear a lot of things, but when you actually get the chance to speak directly with the staff, I think you get a better feel for all the great things that are happening in our schools. So thank you to all the staff that are working overtime for these open houses, and that'll be tomorrow too as well. So just wanted to thank everybody.
Thank you. And just to be clear, there will be representatives of all the high schools at the School of the Arts tomorrow, correct?
President Peterson and members of the board, yes. We have a process where we have had all of our 8th grade students this week to go over to North Division High School. And all of our high schools are represented there. And they have a passport process where they can go to various schools and sign up. And then on Saturday, we open up the enrollment piece at the High School of the Arts. So families can come with their young person and register on the spot.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the board? Okay, we have one other communication from the superintendent. Is that true?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have an additional communication this month, and that is the communication regarding transportation. And this is a report with possible action. We're speaking on services for the 22-23 school year. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the administration please present this report?
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. We recognize that transportation help us facilitate a strong start to the school year. With that, I will have David Falferic to provide an update related to the progress in student transportation services for this school year. David.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. President Peterson, members of the board, David Falferic, Director of Business and Transportation Services for Milwaukee Public Schools. I'm just going to highlight some items related to kind of the opening, and I'll start by saying I personally feel like we had a very successful opening. I'll qualify that statement with kind of how typically an opening starts, and just to kind of give you some benchmarks, last year we ended the year with approximately 535 school buses and about 90 to 100 non-yellow buses. We started out the year this year. Actually, I'm just going to, I'll say we're currently at about 580 school buses and over 180 vans or human service vehicles. So that's an addition of almost 150 vehicles to the fleet. Sometimes it doesn't feel as if that is there, and there's a whole lot of reasons for that, and I'll just call it September. We, for example, processed almost 16,000 route adjustments. Those are changes in a month. We got 40,000 kids on school buses, so that's quite a few changes in 1 month. And I think that kind of underscores some of the challenges we have over the summer tracking where people go in a highly mobile environment. And so without getting too much into the weeds there, obviously you set up bus routes, and when you get that volume of change, it creates quite a challenge from a timing standpoint. And so if you were to ask schools maybe what their number one challenge was, it probably would have been timely arrivals, particularly for the later tier schools. So I'll fully acknowledge that. And I'll put out there, though, that, I think the biggest problem that we have is keeping up with the volume of things and trying to continue to provide good customer service and not getting somebody off the phone to get to the next person. And so that being said, we currently, as it stands right now, have vehicles that we need to assign, and so it's kind of dismantling packages and then kind of configuring them so that they can make better sense given I'll say the dust has pretty much cleared, September again being the major volume of changes. If I were to talk about challenges for the school year, I think it really is besides the timing, it continues to be attendance. And so we have a butt in every seat, plus some, but, we plan for about 10 to 15% reserve ratio. And when you have excess of that, that's where we run into problems. And without, again, getting too much into it, it becomes if for some reason on a particular day we have a high amount of absenteeism that you can't predict, then you're trying to pivot and do things for a one-off, for basically something that you don't anticipate to be long-term, but, obviously families don't understand that, and so, and nor should they. So I think part of our challenge is just making sure when you have high absenteeism in a particular, I want to back up a second and just say, in September, contractors play marketplace. Drivers play marketplace, and they kind of try to figure out where they want to work. And then in a highly competitive employment market, what we'll typically see is then you'll see advertising for a certain wage, and then over there somebody will advertise for a higher wage or maybe a higher bonus to start on. And then we've got a whole lot of folks that kind of get back into the industry or have just started the industry, and they do it for a couple of weeks and they say, yeah, this isn't for me, or I don't like the culture in this particular environment. I'm going to go over to this environment over here instead. And so we do see quite a bit of movement in September that contributes to, hey, I have a driver, and then all of a sudden on a Tuesday, there's a no-call, no-show, and we're like, what happened? And then we find out that they actually went to a competitor, and that's where we've got a shuffle. That doesn't, I've been here a long time, this happens every year. We really try to, part of that has to do with other factors. They maybe got a bus route that they didn't want, or they're really just unhappy with this particular package that they ended up getting. So that kind of works itself out over the first couple of weeks, and I think if you were to do some surveying from the start of the school year to now, you would probably see that the responses reflect that. But I have obviously the utmost confidence in our staff to make sure that we continue to address things and really put the pieces together so that we don't continue to see timing delays or specific elements that we know are, I'm just going to say, unavoidable. I mean, there's just a lot of factors that come into it. But I would not be sitting here last year telling you we have a surplus, and we would have, obviously been having a conversation about how many buses we needed to cut and how many students were without transportation. So I do want to put things into perspective and kind of make sure that people understand transportation is a volatile environment every September, and we do actually have more drivers than we have routes currently, and that's a really good position to be in, specifically if you were to look in the news and see places like Franklin, this public school system that have a deficit still to this day. And I'll point out that they're paying their drivers $4 less an hour, so that is a product of that. So the actions that we took last year, a number of actions from tiering to helping them attract and retain drivers, I do feel strongly that we're reaping the benefits in our region relative to the people around us. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions that I can answer.
Does the board wish to make any comments or ask any questions? Yes. Dr. Carr.
I'll just quickly say great work. This is significant progress from last year. I remember the calls, I remember the complaints, and I think it's easy for people to, point the finger, but the fact of the matter is, like, it was occurring, the transportation issues were occurring across the state and even the country, and so I just want to say great work.
Dr. Simpson.
Thank you. Yes, I would echo that. Just, a lot of work has gone into making this year go much smoother, and I appreciate that. One concern I did hear more recently, just wanted to check in to make sure that Infinite Campus has been updated to match what's our reality, and I just wonder if there is an update on that.
Administration.
Director Simpson, President Peterson, members of the board, David Pfeiffer, Director of Business Transportation Services. There was some technological transition issues that reflected a differential between our source transportation system and Infinite Campus, and the reason that becomes important is teachers load by homerooms and by classrooms, and there was some issues with that information being accurate or reflecting the proper data. That was addressed, I want to say, about second week of school. It had to do with the two different calendars and one part of it being updated and the other part not being updated, but I'm happy to say that that has been addressed.
Great.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Any other comments? Dr. Garcia.
Yes, I just had a question. So if there's a family who is looking to maybe make an adjustment in the package that they got for their student, can you just walk us through what that line of communication, like what are the touch points that folks should be following?
Absolutely. Typically, the school is the hub, so everything that we communicate has to do with communicating with schools, and the logic behind that is they get emergency cards. They want to make sure that the information that is accurate is coming from the appropriate source. So we wouldn't take information over the phone for a variety of reasons. We refer them to the school, and once they've updated Infinite Campus, then there's an electronic process, and it basically puts them in a queue, and then we've got staff in our office that process the queue and respond back to the school. And that way, that family gets communicated in the morning or for their morning busing, but again, at the same time, part of the challenge is making sure that kids are put in the right bus lines at the elementary school level, and that you notify the teacher, because they got to make sure that they, if there is, again, 15, 16,000 changes in a month, they move from Route 10 to Route 20 to Route 30, and you certainly don't want students being put on Route 10 if now they're supposed to be on Route 20. And without getting too much into why there are delays on the first couple of weeks, that is part of the reality of what happens, is because there's so much churning and there's so much communication for the dust to settle. We have delays where kids are put on bus A and they should have been put on bus B, and then we bring them back to the school, or we do something and then it causes a delay to the second tier. And again, all that stuff gets worked out, and that is a product of why September is just so messy. But that's part of the main reason why we want to make sure we communicate all of those changes with the school, so that not only the parent gets communicated, but any school staff that participates in the loading process.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll just add my thank you, and I think even this brief discussion shows how how complicated things are, and some of us who've been around for a long time, like myself, always learn about. You dig deep, and it's more and more complicated, but we're off to a good start, so thank you very much. Thank your staff for us, please. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. President, there is one report from the Office of Board Governance this month, and that is the monthly report with possible action on the legislative activities affecting MPS. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the Office of Board Governance please present that report?
Yes, Mr. President, Mr. Chris Thiel is at the podium and will deliver the report this month.
Thank you.
announced her budget on September 15th in further detail. And as I've come before you in the past, and as the board has discussed in the past, the issue of context, I think, is always crucially important in this conversation. When we last spoke, I believe I stated that in order to basically get school districts back to close to where they need to be, the proposal is going to have to be over $2 billion. And this proposal is. So in terms of leadership from the state superintendent, in terms of leadership from the governor, in terms of understanding what students across the state need, they have demonstrated that leadership with this proposed budget, which is fantastic. And normally, if I came before you in years past and said there's a proposal out here for $2 billion plus, we would just be talking about how fantastic that was. But as we know, the challenge here is both thanking the leaders for their leadership and also reminding the folks of the context that we're in. We've not had a per pupil adjustment over the last 14 years that's kept pace with inflation. That's where we began. And we used to be a state that reimbursed students with disabilities at close to 70%. We're down at 29%. So the framing, whether you talk to the Wisconsin Association of School Boards or the Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators or Jeff Eide over at the Rural Schools Alliance or anybody who's attached to actually being on the ground level at a school district level operating a district, this is being seen as a restoration proposal, something that begins to repair the harm that's been done over the past years to students, and to, again, try to keep the promise to children that we've made in the state in the past to at least provide a per pupil adjustment that keeps pace with the rate of inflation. And another dominant piece here is the proposal that the state superintendent has to increase the reimbursement rate for special education from 45% to 60%. And as I was driving over here, I was speaking with a friend. There's various meetings going on, but in the last session, a law was passed so that there be a financial transparency study group that we are a part of at the state level. And one of the things that happens in the discussion between school districts, the school district level, where you actually have to operate schools, and the state level and the statutory language that legislators get to use, because that's a language they write and it's now law, is that we do something that they wouldn't allow you to get away with if you're running a lemonade stand or getting your MBA at Marquette or UWM. I called my friend who got his MBA and I said, if you were trying to get your MBA and you insisted on only talking about revenue and you never talked about cost, would you graduate from that program? He said, no, they'd kick me out on Maryland Avenue, right? You have to talk about cost. You have to talk about the full context. And he said, I don't even know what you're talking about in an MBA. You should just talk about selling lemonade. Any 4-year-old will tell you that if you try to sell lemonade for 50 cents, but it costs you 60 cents to make the lemonade, you're going out of business. And what we have in particular in the framing of the conversation, and that's why this is difficult, because people are going to hear $2 billion. And the media, and we all do this, right? There's $2 billion out there, and people lose the broader context and think of it only in the moment and use the word increase. It's not an increase. This is restoration of funds that have been taken from children. And frankly, it doesn't even get us back to where we need to be relative to the last 14 years. The good news is that over the next 2 years, what has been proposed here is our per pupil funding would move $1,069 adjusted from where we are today. That's positive news relative to getting zero over the last 2 years. It's not enough relative to inflation still. So people are, this board, any board in the state of Wisconsin, any administration trying to run a school district and do a financial presentation to the board, we have to, I think everybody's trying to do this across the state, really frame what this budget proposal is in real dollar terms, along with the cost of doing all the things we need to do with kids. And that goes for the special education piece in particular. The state speaks only in revenue when we talk about the special education funding. The headline of the special education funding will be the sizable number attached to it. But it's not more money. It's filling a hole, but not filling it all the way. So the hole relative to what the state is proposing is, right now, for example, the state superintendent proposes getting to a 90% reimbursement rate. If that happened for Milwaukee, that would mean $112 million more dollars. I said it, I just did it right there. That would mean $112 million. It's not more. It's $112 million that we are paying out in cost to make sure that we serve our students. It's going to be framed as more, and it's so easy to slip up and do that. But in terms of operating the school district, to keep it in the terms that are real, 45% would restore $28 million to this district in the first year. 60% restores $56 million. But the fact of the matter is, we would still be operating with a deficit there. And the reason that is important, and again, the discussion going on with this transparency committee is, we've got a lot of people who, we've heard this term, right? That I come from business, right? Sometimes this you hear the spiel about, we come from business and we have the answers. Any business person out there has to operate with revenue and cost. And if you don't, you go out of business. But somehow when we talk about schools, we forget about the cost side. And the fact of the matter is, especially in special education, and you can go back to the Wisconsin Policy Forum report on this, even in districts that have higher percentages of students with disabilities, the relative amount you have to educate your population is being diminished relative to your neighbors because the state is not picking up a cost that they once did. So, very proud of the leadership here. We asked for these things. This board was one of the first, if not the first board, to pass a resolution asking for a 90% reimbursement rate, because that's the amount that students in private schools get. This board passed that resolution. Other people have followed. The state superintendent has made that acknowledgement now in her budget. 5 years ago, if you said that out loud, people looked, they did. They looked at us like we were crazy to even say 90% out loud. It was the right thing to do. And we need that funding, because this is not more. This is repairing the harm that's been done over the past year. So on the one hand, positive leadership, and I think our thanks has to go to people for showing that leadership. The challenge is making sure that we talk about this in the right way so people understand what it means for our kids, and that we need to continue to lead until we do all we can for the students as we know they need it. So happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions by the board members? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you for that presentation. I just wanted to add, just for perspective, if this is the first time hearing about, this issue, just that people know that this is a problem, and that there was a bipartisan blue ribbon commission on education funding that was convened at the request of the GOP and led by GOP leaders, but gathered input from people across the state. And they issued recommendations that were welcomed by education advocates everywhere across the state. And so the legislators know that these are problems, and they have recommendations that they could very easily have picked up many years ago. And I walked 60 miles for 60% funding, and I know we got a little bit of an increase up to 29%, but that has never been, a little bit of an increase was never our ask. And so it's frustrating that we have to keep I think you've brought it up, Dr. Carolyn Stanford Taylor had, we have to stop admiring the problem and do something about it. And so I welcome this call for 90%. It is a state mandate that we provide these services. It is a moral mandate that we provide these services. And by not fully funding special education, they are failing every student in every district. And so it is extremely frustrating. So I'm sorry if I sound a little bit like I'm on my soapbox. I just want to give that perspective that this is not a new request. It's a request that we've been asking for across the state for years. I also just wanted to add that Wisconsin Association of School Boards recently shared a story that there will be across Wisconsin, school referendums for basic budget expenses will hit a 10-year high, that there will be 81 referendums, I think, on the November ballot. And these are not for like shiny new things. They're basically to keep the lights on. And so I welcome the budget that was introduced. I think every district in this state would benefit for it, and I hope that people can see through whatever cultural issues they're concocting to fight against, to see that by failing to fund education, they are failing to invest in their own children, in their own districts. And this is a budget that will, to your point, restore the harm that has been done for too many years. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Dr. Garcia.
Yes, I just wanted to call to attention that in this budget, besides, we talked about the per pupil increases, there's also the mention of increasing services that would impact literacy, mental health, school nutrition, and school shortages. So I don't know if there's any of those points that you can just quickly highlight for a listening audience, because I think those are really important things that are tied to, just issues that we hear from maybe our constituents around how to improve those items.
Sure, Director Garcia, members of the board, absolutely. I mean, I think they have heard from us, and the board, the budget that they put out reflects the conversations with school districts like ours about what the needs of children are. I think every conversation I've had over the last many weeks, we went through a pandemic, It's a real thing. And the students are feeling that, the children are feeling that. And our staff have been heroic in helping students, and they continue to be. Because this didn't just end when everybody got a booster shot. People are in schools right now continuing to help children. This budget reflects that. So in terms of the mental health services, as you point out, they've changed the program. Instead of having a competitive grant, there's a new aid program where they recognize we need to get help out and the funding to assist as much as possible. So not only did they add money, but they changed the delivery of those funds in a way that just makes sense for districts across the state. I think we've discussed in the past, they focus on certainly literacy writ large and putting more effort there. Our state, unfortunately, trails the nation in support for English language learners. They attend to that in this budget. And they are, with a couple of different programs and a couple of new streams of funding, doing what they believe they can to assist with developing new teachers and retaining staff. That the Department of Public Instruction and the governor do truly understand whether you're a rural district, urban district, suburban district. We are in a moment where we have to do everything we can to make sure we are developing staff and getting them in place for our students. So there are some big number items in there, and then the other items as well. I think they put robust funding behind and commitment behind the needs of our kids. And if I could also just follow up with Director O'Halloran's point, 60% is a bipartisan number. 60% was the number included in the Blue Ribbon Commission report that was put in place by Speaker Voss. So when we talk about 60% as a reimbursement rate, this is very much in keeping with bipartisan discussions of the past. And I've done this in previous board meetings. I didn't do it yet today, but the state has roughly $7 billion of available balance and rainy day funds. So the time to really, and the opportunity is right here before us to implement a budget like we see and to fine tune it, hopefully, and actually even improve it if we can. So hopefully we have wonderful advocacy across the state, and that energy over the next months, I think, will be needed again.
Thank you. Other comments from the board? Mr. Thiel, if you could just explain where the 90% comes from, the notion that 90% should be covered.
Well, we have, the state, I want to say 7 years ago, passed a law relative to students with disabilities in private schools. And the Special Needs Scholarship Fund is a statutory language used to describe it. And the Special Needs Scholarship Fund provides a minimum of 90% reimbursement to private schools working with students with disabilities. I think in most cases, probably, I haven't seen the percentage on this, but they provide actually 100% reimbursement up to roughly $18,500 of cost. So I think the majority of students, as far as we are aware, come under that $18,500 level, and then there certainly are exemptions of some students who may be more expensive. So by and large, I think there's something closer probably to a 100% reimbursement rate, but we use the most conservative figure we can, which is after that 100% reimbursement at $18,500, any costs above that are reimbursed at 90%. So Wisconsin School Boards Association has a resolution calling for 90%. This board led with that leadership. And simply the ask is that students with disabilities in public schools be provided the same level of support that students with disabilities in private schools are.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, what's the next item of business?
The next item on tonight's agenda is the monthly report with possible action on the activities of the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency please present this report?
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. I just want to take a brief moment to recognize a staff member on the Contract Compliance Services team, Ms. Claudia Garcia, who this month received her formal certification as a Contract Compliance Administrator. This is a distinction only given to those who have completed a 2-year commitment and training. So I just want to thank the CCS team and Ms. Garcia for their commitment to supporting the supplier diversity initiatives of the district. Thank you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Does the board wish to make any comments? Dr. Gokul-Gandhi.
Well, wherever you are, Ms. Garcia, congratulations, and we are lucky to have you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is our next item of business?
The next item on tonight's agenda is the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. Student expulsions.
The chair will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the reports of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Do I have such a motion? Dr. Garcia.
Sorry. I move to accept the report as provided by administration.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Dr. O'Halloran.
I second.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Garcia's motion to accept the reports of the independent hearing officers, seconded by Director O'Halloran. On the motion is read. Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Chair Peterson?
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you. We will now have reports of the standing committee. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. No items of this report has been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside? A comment on one? Right, okay. So, I mean, any board member is welcome to set something aside.
Mr. Chair, just to give board members time to take a look, if there is an item that needs to be set aside before we have dispensed with the balance of the reports, we can set that aside. Okay.
Okay, so seeing no other items to be set aside, we'll move on to the next one. What is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items of this to be set aside? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next report. Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside from this committee? Seeing none, we'll move on. At this point,
Mr. Chair, members of the board, at this point, we would entertain a motion to accept the reports of these standing committees.
very good. Will this, yes, go ahead.
I move that we accept the reports of these standing committees.
I
Dr. Carr?
second it.
Second.
Thank you. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Simpson's motion, seconded by Director Carr, to move approval of the reports of the standing committees. On the motion as read, Director Carr?
Aye.
Director Garcia?
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi?
Aye.
Director O'Halloran?
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
And President Peterson?
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
Okay, Madam Secretary, what's our next item?
The next item is the reports of the regular items of business. And we have 2 regular items of business. The first one is the report of the board's delegate. Mr. Chair, many groups have been on summer break, so the delegates have no reports this month, with the exception of the delegate of CISA 1. And that delegate is Director Herndon, and that report is before you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, what's the next item of regular business?
The next item of regular business is the report of the president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Oh, that's me. I'm so happy that we're moving along. I'm getting a little giddy. Yes, that's before you. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Except I forgot to ask Director O'Halloran to say something.
I mean, I noticed. I was just kidding. To everyone who is being hired, promoted, we just want to thank you for bringing your talents to MPS to serve our students and community. Thank you so much for all you do for all of our students and community.
Thank you very much, Director O'Halloran. Madam Secretary, are there any items of unfinished business?
Mr. President, we have no unfinished business.
Madam Secretary, are there any items of new business?
We do not have any new business for referral tonight.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
We have no communications for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one resolution, and that is Resolution 2223R-008 by Director O'Halloran on Runaway Prevention Month.
Great, that resolution will be referred to the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. President, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
There being no further business before this, but we will,
I'm
before
so
we,
sorry.
go ahead,
Oh,
Director.
I just want to say this week, the district, this week, maybe it was last week, the days are running together. Anyway, there was a ST Math adoption district-wide, and I just want to say that that was so wonderful to see. I saw it across all the news sites. I had the privilege of working with ST Math at Escuela View, and I'm just really happy that we're moving towards a more technologically savvy approach to education. And I just want to congratulate Dr. Posley and his team on a really successful implementation.
Thank you very much. There being no further business before this board meeting, I know people are disappointed, but this meeting is adjourned. And we are good.